I'm here to talk about something which is very important if you're going to source on Alibaba.com, and that is whether we are going to keep your IP safe. It doesn't make a lot of sense to source from a platform where your IP is going to be stolen. So I want to assure you that we think about IP, we care about IP, and we're here to protect your IP. I'm part of Alibaba International's global IP enforcement team, and briefly today I just want to talk about what we're doing to make sure that your IP is protected. Whether you're selling on our platforms, whether you're sourcing from our platforms, or even if neither is true and you just see infringing versions of your product on our platforms. We're serious about making sure that our platforms are as clean as possible. Now, at least some of you may have heard that Alibaba underwent the most significant restructuring of its corporate structure last year in March of 2023. The most significant restructuring in its 20 years of existence. Basically what happened was that the company was split into 6 separate businesses. One of them is Alibaba International Digital Commerce Group, and Alibaba.com is a part of that. To break it down a little bit further, of those 6 business groups, 2 of them are e-commerce companies. One includes all of our China-facing platforms, and one of them includes all of our international-facing platforms. Alibaba.com, of course, is one of our international-facing platforms and is part of the Alibaba International Digital Commerce Group. You can see the other 5 platforms which are there as well. And the reason that I mention all of this, even though you're here mostly to hear about Alibaba.com, is that we're taking a global approach to IP protection. And we're worried not just about whether somebody is infringing your IP on Alibaba.com, but whether they're doing it on any of our other platforms as well. So that's why most of our IP protection programs are designed for some or all of the platforms, not just one. So, since that reorganization, what has or hasn't changed about Alibaba's IP protection programs? The number one thing which hasn't changed is our robust commitment to protecting your IP. We've been serious about that for years now, and we've been just as serious about it since the reorganization. Another thing which hasn't changed is our basic approach to IP protection. It's what we call our 4 pillars. And when you think about it, they make sense. The first one is notice and takedowns, or in Europe they call it notice and action. For those of you not familiar with that term, that basically means when a rights holder files a notice with us asking us to take down a listing which is infringing their IP. So we try to make it as easy and efficient as possible for you, if it comes to that, to file notice and takedown requests for infringing listings on Alibaba.com or any of our other platforms. We also, and this doesn't have to concern you, but it helps you, we engage in proactive monitoring. That is, we use the technology, because at the end of the day, basically Alibaba is a technology company. Helping people sell things is one of the things it does, but it is a technology company and leverages that technology to crawl over its own platforms and on average take down 6 or 7 infringing listings for every one which we take down in response to a complaint from rights holders. So what that means is most of these infringing listings you never see, because we catch them before they ever go live, so you don't have to complain about it. We're very proud of our efforts there. The third pillar is offline enforcement. We know that just taking down listings is not enough to stop counterfeits. We also have to support offline investigations. That is, not just taking down the listings online, but going offline to help, especially law enforcement, take down the suppliers, distributors, manufacturers who are pumping out the counterfeits. Because otherwise, you can take down their listing, but they're just going to put another one up the next day. If we can shut down their production, and I'm not saying we can do it in every case, but if we can do enough big cases that the counterfeiters take notice, then that's making a real effort to stop the source of the problem. Finally, we collaborate with stakeholders. That includes rights holders, of course, like all of you. It also includes law enforcement, government agencies, and many of the industry associations which represent rights holders around the world. We'll talk first of all about notice and takedown, and that's the thing which is most likely to concern you directly, because if you do find an infringing listing on Alibaba.com or any of our other platforms, this is going to be what you're going to need to do to file a complaint with us and get that taken down. We have probably the easiest and most efficient way to file a notice and takedown request is to use one of our online platforms. And if we have time, I'll ask Lydia to assist me in showing you live the actual takedown platform so that you can see how easy it is. But basically, we have two different ones. We have one for our China-facing platforms. Again, that's called the Taobao and Tmall group. And we have one for Alibaba International Digital Commerce Group. So I realize, as I said, that most of you are here because you might be sourcing from Alibaba.com, but the bottom line is you might find infringing listings on some of these other platforms as well. So two different IPP platforms. There used to be one, but once we reorganized, we felt like it was better if we had directed platforms for each of the big groups of e-commerce platforms. While the IPP portal, the online portals are definitely the most efficient way to file notice and take down requests, we also have an online form for people who don't really want to register an account and go through uploading their IP. The reason the platform is more efficient if you're filing any significant number of notice and takedown requests is for reasons like you can upload proof of your IP just once, and that way every time you go back to the platform you don't have to reproduce your IPP proof. But we do have the online form, which especially for a lot of small and medium-sized enterprises may be the easier way to do it. It's simply PDF with fillable blanks, and you go through there and describe the IP which is being infringed and how it's being infringed. These are not things that you necessarily need to remember, but just as examples of the kind of tips that we give to people. If you're filing a notice and takedown request for trademark infringement, you want to make sure that you get the basics right. You want to make sure that you're filing a request about a product which actually falls within the class of your trademark. So, not that any of you are with Nike, but just to give an example, if Nike tried to file a notice and takedown request for somebody using a swoosh on the side of a car, that wouldn't work because cars are not covered by that trademark. So same kind of thing for any other company. You've got to make sure that it's within the right class. You need to make sure that the IP that you've provided proof of is current. Registration certificate ordinarily in the U.S. needs to be renewed at least every 10 years. For copyright, we try to be as flexible as possible. Copyright, unlike trademark, doesn't require that you register your copyright. By law, you have a copyright if you're the one who created this original work, whether you bother to register it or not. But we still need you to explain why it's your work. And so if you go on our IPP platform, you'll find something we call the copyright claim statement. That allows you to fill out enough information about the copyright you're asserting that we can determine whether or not it's yours. We try, again, to be as flexible as we can, so you can either provide copies of, say, the exact photo or whatever it is that you're claiming has been infringed, or you can simply provide the URL for your website if you have one, and that way you can file a complaint about any photo or image or copyrighted work which appears on that website. For patents, and I realize that for a lot of you that may be the most relevant thing, you just have to understand that in China, and a lot of these are involving Chinese manufacturers, these infringement reports, if you're going to assert a patent in China, for instance, you have to not just show that you've registered the patent, but you have to get what's called an evaluation report, just because of sort of a difference in the way that China examines patent applications versus the U.S. Again, nothing I'm expecting you to remember right now, but just understand that you do have to make sure that you're paying attention to the details if you're filing notice and takedown requests for some of these different types of IP. We also, just because oftentimes you have a question which can't really be addressed in the IPP portal, and there's no blank for it in the PDF, we do simply have a mailbox, IPR@alibaba-inc.com. And you can basically write there about anything. Examples of the kinds of questions that we get a lot at that mailbox are account registration, how to document your IP rights, trouble you're having logging into your account, specific takedown requests where, as I said, you haven't been able to follow up on online, or where the seller says, no, I wasn't infringing, and files a counter notice. That can go back and forth. So if they file a counter notice and we accept that and say, well, okay, the seller isn't infringing, it doesn't stop there. You can always go back and say, no, what the seller has provided here doesn't, it's a fraudulent document. That's a very common example of the kind of thing which somebody will come to us with if we've accepted a counter notice. We also, because part of the Alibaba group now, part of Alibaba International, is Lazada, which is the collection of 6 country-specific platforms. In Southeast Asia, we have a separate IP mailbox for Lazada. A little bit more now about the IPP platform. This is a screenshot of what you'll see when you first go to the URL, aidcgroup.net. What you'll do after you sign in is then go to the User Center. And again, if we have a little bit of time, I'll ask Lydia to pull that up so that you can see what the User Center actually looks like. This is a screenshot from the User Center, and as you can see, the first thing you have to do is pick the platform about which you're complaining. So if you find an infringing listing, the first thing you need to do is simply tell us, is that listing on Alibaba.com, AliExpress, or Lazada, and we'll soon have a couple of other platforms which are included in this portal as well. We are expanding all the time and trying to expand our resources to parallel that. So we are doing more and more in Korea. And we now have the IPP platform in Korean. I'm not sure that's applicable to any of you, but just as an example of what we're trying to do to make it easier for rights holders around the world to file complaints. We're also going to be launching a Spanish language version quite soon, because another part of the Alibaba International family is Moravia, a platform in Spain specifically for Spanish entrepreneurs as opposed to cross-border sales from China. All right, the second of our 4 pillars, which I mentioned at the beginning, is proactive monitoring. And even though this is how we take down most listings, it's really the area I can say the least about, because a lot of this is proprietary. It wouldn't make much sense for us to publicize how we find these infringing listings, or the sellers would simply take advantage of that. But this gives you a general sense of the type of factors that we take into consideration, that our algorithms take into consideration when they're crawling over our own platforms looking for infringing listings. And as those of you who have any experience with algorithms or proactive monitoring probably can surmise, this is all data-driven. And so in many cases we turn to the stakeholders themselves, the rights holders, for additional data to put into our algorithm, because they know their products better than anybody else. Typically, proactive monitoring is used mostly with big companies, so it's less likely to apply to smaller companies like those represented here. But nevertheless, we're trying to do whatever we can on the front end so that rights holders don't have to worry about this at all. The third pillar is offline enforcement. There are basically 3 different ways that we can end up supporting law enforcement in criminal investigation. The first is when the police simply come to us. Like any other legitimate company, we respond to law enforcement requests and try to do whatever we can. Largely, this is taking place in China, because largely the investigations and complaints concern manufacturers and suppliers there. But we're increasingly working with law enforcement in the rest of the world, as I'll show you in a couple of slides. The second way that we can help with criminal investigations is when a brand is working with law enforcement. For instance, in China with the Provincial Security Bureau, and they come to us and say, you know, we've gone to the Shenzhen police with this complaint. We're hoping that if they come to you, you can provide information. At the end of the day, we still need to get a request from the police themselves, but if we've been alerted by the brand, then we can be prepared to do that. Finally, we go to law enforcement with leads of our own. From last year that I had measurements for this, from July of 2022 to June of 2023, 168 times Alibaba went to law enforcement without being asked by law enforcement, without being asked by the brand, and said, hey, we've got this data which we think merits criminal investigation. At the end of the day, the police make their own decision about whether or not to go forward with those, but we're trying our best to make sure that enforcement doesn't stop at platform's edge. And we're taking down the suppliers and distributors as well as simply taking down their listings. These are statistics, again, from the last year for which I have specific measurements, July of 2022 to June 2023. In addition to the referrals, you see 751 arrests, 273 facilities run by the counterfeiters taken down, and case value exceeding 159 million. This is just an example of some of the overseas police agencies that we've worked with. The primary way that we get involved in investigations overseas, basically because of privacy restrictions, so there's a limit to the information which our company can disclose about Chinese nationals to foreign law enforcement. But what we can do is when there are, for instance, bulk buyers, that is, overseas buyers who are sourcing counterfeits or sourcing generics, which they then attach counterfeit labels to from our platforms, we can help foreign law enforcement to go after the targets overseas. So we've worked with the US IPR Center in the US, City of London Police in the UK, Gendarmerie Nationale in France, the Guardia Civil in Spain, Guardia di Finanza in Italy, and even Czech Customs. Final pillar is stakeholder collaboration. Basically three major groups that we work with in the fight against counterfeits, because we know that we can't do this alone. We're going to be much more effective if we can partner. Obviously, first and foremost, rights holders, including folks like you. We also work with many of the big industry associations which represent rights holders, not because we don't care about the voices of the individual rights holders, but just because there are cases where the industry association, because it's coming to us with information from 20 or 100 different companies, is in a position to help us in a big way. Finally, we're actively engaging with governments around the world, with both civil and criminal authorities who are focused on IPR enforcement, to support their activities and their investigations and their public events whenever we can. That starts with my team. And the reason that I always like to include this slide, even though some of these are less than professional photos and it's a little bit amateurish, is because I want to make the point that my team is a collection of individuals. We're real people. If you actually need to talk to a person, you can talk to me. My email will be on the last slide here. If you take one picture of the whole thing, just take a picture of the last slide, take my email address, and I promise you, if you email me, I will either email or call you back. You can talk to a person. And in most of, certainly we have 5 of us in the US, we have folks in Europe, we have folks in Asia, and at the end of the day, no matter how easy we make it with our online platform and everything else, we know that sometimes you just need to talk to a person, and that's what we're all about. We can listen to what you are or aren't able to accomplish and see if there's something that we can suggest or kind of work with you to contact headquarters, because otherwise, as I said, you're just dealing with an email or whatever, and I know that can be frustrating. We all understand that. These are examples of some of the trade associations that we work with around the world. With almost all of these, we've sponsored both IPR initiatives and also things like major stakeholder events. These are examples of some of the conferences that we've supported, many of them government-driven, since that's our preference, but also some sponsored by private industry. The only thing with private industry is we don't want to play favorites. So if a particular service provider wants us to speak at a conference, usually the answer is no, just because we don't want to make it seem as if we're favoring that service provider over another. Government events, obviously, it's a more neutral stance. These are examples of events that we organized ourselves. This is the Alibaba Anti-Counterfeiting Alliance. This was formed in 2017. It was the first alliance between an e-commerce platform and rights holders to try and fight counterfeiting. And while there were just 30 initial members, there are now 221 representing 1,100 brands, including 50 of the U.S.'s largest and most famous brands. Some of the ways that they do this are by breaking into working groups which cluster on whatever industry they represent. They sponsor a wide range of events. Since the reorganization, the AACA has focused mostly on the China-facing platforms because they represent mostly companies which are global and have a presence in China, but we're developing a pilot program now for something called Alibaba, the Alibaba Anti-Counterfeiting Alliance International, which will do the same thing for the international-facing platforms. Finally, when Jack Ma founded Alibaba over 20 years ago, and the first platform he founded, of course, was Alibaba.com. This was at the heart of what he wanted to do, connecting mostly Chinese small businesses who were expert in manufacturing with rights holders in the West. SMEs were always at the top of mind for him, and they still are. Over 60% of the companies which sell on our platforms are SMEs. That's why we spend so much time thinking about SMEs. And that applies in the IP context as well. So we, in 2019, were the first, and so far as I know, only e-commerce platform in the world to form a special SME advisory committee. It's up to 37 SMEs now, about 20 of them in China, the rest from the West. And among other things, we bring them together for quarterly meetings. We also sponsor their travel to major IPR conferences so that they can liaison with other stakeholders. And what they do is, come to us with some of the specific problems that SMEs face, which we might not be thinking about in the context of large rights holders. For instance, the arts and crafts industry, where their lifeblood is new designs which they're coming up with, once or twice a year. Many times those designs, because they're working with manufacturers in China, are stolen and then infringed before they even have a chance to sell them themselves. So we've been working with a select group of companies from the arts and crafts industry to try and address that specific set of problems which they face. Another thing that I want you all to be aware of, especially those of you with SMEs, and I assume that's most of you, that Alibaba will actually pay for your first year of membership in IACC Market Safe. IACC is the International Anti-Counterfeiting Coalition, and they run a program called Market Safe, which basically files your notice and takedown requests for you. They have bilingual analysts who basically do this all day long, are very familiar with our platforms, and I think almost anybody you speak to who's been a member of MarketSafe will tell you it's an incredibly efficient program. And the bottom line is, it is free for you for the first year. So there's no catch, there's no drawback, I'm not hiding anything. If you want to file a notice and takedown request and you're an SME, I would definitely go to the ICC MarketSafe website, sign up for it as soon as you can, because they will do a great job not only of protecting your IP and our platforms, but also basically teaching you how they do it, so that if you decide not to pay for the membership after that first year, you'll be a lot better equipped to file your own requests. This is the slide I said you should take a picture of. That's my email at the bottom, e.williams@alibaba-inc.com. And if we have just a second, Lydia, I think, is going to help me here. I just wanted to very briefly show you what our IPP platform looks like. Because, as I said, this is what you'd be most likely to be doing if you were trying to protect your own IP. You'd be going to this online platform and you would be uploading proof of your IP and then filing notice and takedown requests. All right, so earlier I said when you go to the URL for our IPP platform, you'll see a landing page and then there will be an option to click User Center. When you go to the User Center, this is what you're going to see. And probably the most important part of this are the drop-down menus on the left. If you can just click on Toolbox, Lydia. So these are examples of some of the things we make available. The first one is submit brand knowledge. That's where if you know that there are sort of key misspellings of your brand name or something like that the counterfeiters always use, you can let us know about that. We'll include that when we're crawling over our own platforms looking for algorithms. You can take that and you can give it to us for proactive monitoring. We have counter notice references. What that means is, oftentimes, as I said, when you file a notice takedown request and the seller says, oh no, I'm not infringing, and they file what they think is evidence that they're not infringing, it may very well be a fake invoice or a fake power of authority. I wish that didn't happen, but the bottom line is it does, and we're aware of that. What makes it easier and quicker for us is if you have examples of a legitimate power authority or legitimate invoice, you just upload those, and that makes it a lot easier and a lot quicker for our analysts on the back end to say, okay, we've got a copy of the real invoice for this company. What the seller's submitting is bogus. And then we are working, I'm not going to say it's completely finished yet, but we're working on one-click removal, which is basically where we know enough about how to identify infringing listings of your company that we come to you and we say, we found this listing, we think it's infringing. If you think it is, or you confirm that it is, one click and it comes down. Under My IPR, if you can move down there, Lydia. First of all, IPR submission. That is basically where you upload proof of your IP. So if you've registered a trademark, you upload a copy of the registration certificate. If you have registered a patent, you upload proof of your patent. So pretty easy, pretty straightforward. You can see designations for the different types of IP. Now if you can click on IPR management over on the left side, this is just, we've populated it here with some fake entries just so you can see what it looks like. But basically, after you've uploaded your IP, this is what you'll have. You'll have a list of every piece of IP that you've uploaded. So if you're filing a notice and takedown request and you're saying that it infringes a particular piece of IP, if you've already loaded that, uploaded proof of that IP, you don't need to upload it again. It'll be on your drop-down list and you just click on the particular piece of IP that you're claiming has been infringed here. If you can go back over to complaint submission, click on submit a complaint. As I said, the first thing you would do here is simply figure out which website it applies to. Click on one. And what it does is just take you through step by step of different types of IPR infringement, why you're claiming that it's infringing. You add, as I said, whatever particular piece of IP it is that you're talking about. And then once you've done that, and I know I'm running out of time here, but once you've done that, you're able to track the entire process. That's the reason that we suggest, even though there are other ways to do it, including the online form or the IPR mailbox, that you use the platform if you possibly can, because it just means in real time you can track the progress of your complaint. If the seller files a counter notice, that is, if they claim no, the thing is not infringing, you'll see that. You'll see whatever materials the seller has submitted to support that. So you're able, as I said, to just track it in real time, and that's usually the most efficient way to do it. I don't want to keep anybody from the coffee break, which I think is scheduled for right about now. So I will end on time, but I'll just, my closing message, if you forget everything else, just remember, we do care about IP, we will protect your IP, and there are real people, including me, and I'm right here in the US, so you can always start with me. Even if I can't answer the question, I'll get you to somebody who can. Come to us if you have questions about IP, come to us if you're worried about your IP, come to us if you need guidance on how to protect it. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks, Aaron. Okay. Let's take a break for half an hour and come back at 4 o'clock p.m.